every single one.
So don't forget, we met them, and now we know that they have notes, transcripts. Am I going to use them for this week? Absolutely not. How about you?
Am I going to use them ever?
Um,
We can talk about that in the aftercast,
all right.
which we're going to keep short and sweet.
Yes. I do. Okay, so this is our prepping for, we're skipping ahead to episode number 49. We will go back because we definitely want to go through the principles and everything that has led up to this point. But we're skipping ahead to episode number 49 because they interview us. Yay! But we got to change our names.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is going to be confusing.
Name Sadie and Lori.
How are you? I'm waiting. Okay, so
We did this last minute, by the way. That's usually how we roll. And we were looking for some extra help, and we couldn't find any because it was last minute. So if you're, for some reason, are one of the people that are watching our podcast and you want to be part of this, shoot us an email or a message on the site because we can definitely use some hands.
Yes, we need people to interpret podcasts with us. Come play, please.
Number 49 is called The Impact of Diet Culture on Communication and Representation with Lori Civello and Chelsey Cahilly of the Science Space. I'll read the notes, but I gotta expand it. I do want to say it's not in the notes, and I'm going to remind you 100 times that when we recorded this podcast, I was full in the grips of COVID and my brain was not functioning. And so I'm terrified to relive this and to then have to interpret it because it's gonna, I'm nervous.
This is so meta. I don't think I've ever interpreted myself before.
No, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. I'm excited about this. I'm definitely.
It's gonna be. I've done things that were scripted, like for my website. Hi, my name is Chelsey, and then, you know, but that was something that I wrote that was scripted. That wasn't spontaneous. This is the first time I've ever interpreted myself spontaneously, extemporaneously producing. That's gonna be. I don't know what. I'm going in with no expectations. No expectations.
I want to go.
But I'm really curious though. I'm curious to see.
Did you listen to it
if
all?
I can match my own affect. It's gonna be really weird.
Well, I don't think I speak in English the same way I speak in ASL, right? I mean, I can tell jokes in both.
I don't know. That's what I want to find out. You're gonna take notes? I can't take notes and interpret.
I think I'm gonna have to. I can't find any of my Expo pens because Taylor takes them as his tattoo machines. So, okay.
Speaking of which, I just shared something to you that you'll find very funny. I hope. Okay.
I got a paper out. I don't know if I'm gonna take it.
Yeah, I have it out. It's ready. Nothing's gonna be on this page by the end. Okay.
Okay. So you are both curious. We're both curious to see how we do this, and there's going to be so many biases and filters. I already know there's one part I'm going to edit myself. I'm prepared for it.
Oh no.
I've come to accept it ethically. When that part comes up, I'm going to change it. Did you listen to the whole thing?
No, I didn't make it all the way through.
Great.
All right, so it's really going to be spontaneous.
All right, let's listen to the show notes. I know, much like in our pre-and pod aftercast, I ramble a lot, and I'm sorry. And half the time I don't make sense, so thank goodness for Sadie's editing skills. All right, here are the show notes. This week we're talking to Lori Civello and community theater shows for the Girl Scouts. Can I stop for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've never said that anywhere out loud other than here because Naomi knows. I've known Naomi since high school, so she knows that I've been doing theater since high school, and she knows that I interpreted stuff and got to do like off-Broadway plays and did a lot of
exciting
theater. Yeah, otherwise I never mention it. Anyway. If you're probably like, I've known you for...
Yeah, I never knew that. I was like, that was an interesting tidbit to share.
That's why I said that. Okay. Otherwise I don't normally talk. Normally. I don't know where that accent's from. I'm nervous.
You don't talk normally? Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's just get to it, man. We're off to a great start.
Cancel this. Okay. So that's it. No, nothing else. No, I don't. We've lived this. I think we'll be okay with prep.
And we're about to relive it.
I'm scared because I know what a hot mess it was the day of.
I don't know what a hot mess it was. I haven't listened to it yet.
I just remember sitting in this exact seat in this exact room thinking like, what are you saying? My brain was melting. Okay.
Don't worry. Hopefully you'll be so in interpreter mode that you're not going to be judging yourself.
I'm worried your Sadie will re-record the opening of later.
Welcome to Satisfaction Factor, the podcast. Lori and Chelsea. Naomi here. So this episode might...
That's it, right? Okay.
Hey, friend.
Hi.
How are you feeling?
I liked coming back and doing the opening at the end because of many reasons.
Warm.
I was warmed up.
Same.
I was like, I can just pause this if the mouse would allow me. So because there's always like we get to the halfway point and then we change as interpreters. So
you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like interpreting or whatever.
Right. How does this look to deaf people at some point?
Right.
So I was glad to come back. How are you feeling?
I feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel good. I feel I'm like pleasantly surprised.
That's great. Is it easier interpreting yourself than?
Oh my gosh, yes. I know what I'm gonna say. I have a lot. I actually wrote down notes this time.
Good.
So, the first impression I had was watching you interpret yourself, and I was like, na 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 na. I was like, what is happening? She's like, it's like her voice, but she's side. I was like, my mind is exploding. What is going on? But then it was my turn to interpret for myself, and I was like, I have the perfect R for this. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I didn't have to work to understand I didn't have to work to get pictures because I was like, oh, thank you, already there. That was an interesting experience. And
Yeah.
I wrote down for you, you're a champ interpreting yourself. And I want to know what your experience was.
I felt like I was all over the place as an interpreter, but also as like the hearing guest on the show. There are so many things that you
matched.
You have to say, you know what I mean? Like there's like scripts that you got to get out so everybody can hear them and then hopefully be on the same learning platform or the same discussion platform. So there's things that like I knew I had to say and I said them so fast and it was like, okay. And then I could hear that I wasn't following the conversation because I was following.
You were a little stilted. Yeah, I got you.
On the things that I needed to say. So I felt it, I felt like, well, I'm not being clear as an interpreter, but the speaker, who is also me, is not clear. And it's weird because I know why that person is not clear, and I know what's regulating me as a speaker. What I thought was more interesting is that when I was watching you interpret Naomi, I was very much more in tune to Naomi, and I would be responding to Naomi. But then when you were interpreting you, I was in your modality. I was watching the interpreter, not listening to the English.
So interesting. Why?
No idea.
That is interesting. I wanted to. Oh, there's something you said, and I wanted to. Oh, I wanted to say, when you were talking about how you as the interpreter were kind of having this out of body experience. I mean, you were literally having an out of body experience because you weren't you as the speaker when you were as the interpreter. But how you were getting maybe a little frustrated that the speaker wasn't being clear when you knew what their intention was and where you knew what they meant. And I feel like we feel that as interpreters all the time. So I think that there's this boundary, right? This fine line where you kind of have to feel your way through and be like, I know what you mean, and you're not saying what you mean. So how much liberty can I take in expanding and clarifying this? I feel like that happens to me all the time as an interpreter.
I feel like it was hard not to listen to myself evaluatively. Um, and also like it was kind of easy because I was like, well, I was like 100% in COVID. I knew my brain wasn't working. Like I was having serious issues.
Yeah,
I was like laughing. I'm like,
I remember you were. It was awful. I'm sorry.
I sound so happy. I don't know how that happened.
You were so chipper.
I I'm not normally a chipper person. I'm like, how am I supposed to interpret myself that happy when I'm not that happy? Normally, I don't present that way. But I just
You were
remember
laughing because your kids kept coming
in
in
the
and out.
moment, yeah, my
Yeah.
kids, like, it was a total nightmare recording that for me. We've been in this room working together for the past 6 hours, and there has
Yes.
not been more than one
Nope.
intrusion.
No,
And
not even.
you know, in when we were recording the show, the kids could not stay out of here. You know, the dog
Yeah.
would come in here ripping
Eating
up
everything.
plastic, like noisy plastic. I would start a sentence and I'd have no idea. And like the way I had COVID, it was like I would have moments of clarity, but then my body would have a temperature, and then my body would be fine, and then I would lose my mental clarity. And it was just, and then it was like, so I would start off like
Like fighting yourself.
and then
Yeah.
realize that I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So it was really, it's so, I guess it was a little easier for me because I had that, a little bit of, I can have that compassion for myself because I know where I am.
Good.
But then when I was trying to think about how now I'm presenting to people that don't know that fact, I was having anxiety for myself. I was feeling embarrassed for myself.
I don't think you should feel embarrassed because I was listening. I'm not trying to make you feel better. I was listening as an outsider today a little bit more, and I don't think that you sounded that scattered to me. I think you just sounded like an educated person who had a lot to say and was trying to get it all in while being as clear as possible. You know, I think that it's hard when we have this framework and we have all of this extra lingual knowledge, ELK, and what did you say?
Elk.
Yeah, ELK. And you're trying to cram that. You're trying to cram what, 43 years of experience, and I'm trying to cram 15 years of experience, 17 years of experience into a 49-minute podcast.
So
It's just not possible.
I think I put a lot of pressure on myself when I was like, I want to make sure that I recognize the target audience probably aren't going to be interpreters.
Yeah.
Aren't going to be familiar with the deaf community. And I really think that me as a normal person could have spinned it to make it universally acceptable. Whereas in that moment with that COVID brain, I felt myself failing. And that was my goal. And I started out sometimes, I was like, I'm sure other people can relate. And then I give the most unrelatable scenario.
Really? Maybe I just didn't catch that.
In my brain, I had the connection, right?
Wow.
Like, but I never really got it out. Like, I felt like growing up, like Isle of Misfits is where I belonged, right? And I had a lot of friends that were adopted, for example, right? And we had this, it didn't matter that my parents were deaf and I was like, well, you know what I mean? Like we connected on that level, or like
because you were both misfit toys.
or like the third generation that's happening now, especially in New York City, right? Your parents are Colombian, you're not Colombian, you're American,
right.
And there's this disconnect, right? And so I knew what my intentions were, and I never got them out. I never got there. But I wish I didn't even pose that pressure on myself to make it more relatable. Because then I felt a little inauthentic, and it was too much like script, and not like in the moment. I feel like for you and me, people who know us, they know that we're not scripted. We're in the moment. We're organic. We're, just ebb and flowing with what's happening.
I think you did the best with what you had, though, because I think that, as you have mentioned, what COVID was doing to your brain, if you didn't have a script, who knows where you would have gone, So it's probably good that you had that anchor. I don't think you should come down on yourself for having a strategy, I think that was smart. That was working smarter.
Thank you for that. With COVID, my brain was just, it would like white noise.
Yeah.
out. And so I knew I needed that.
That happens to me sometimes when I'm interpreting, so it happened to me once in here. I wonder if I saw you writing notes after, like while I was interpreting, and I was like, oh gosh. I was like having one of those moments where I was like, I have I lost time. Like the last 16 seconds are blank in my mind. And I'm just gonna hope that this is what they said. I'm gonna just be honest right now about it.
I had a moment where I was like, what just happened? I was on autopilot and I don't like something's weird with my mouse. So I had the podcast over the Zoom so I could see how much time was left and like whatever. And at some point it flipped. And I was like, did I just wake up from a nap? What's different? You know, when you're like, something's changed. And I was like interpreting and I'm like trying to think like, what's different? And then I was like, oh, the screen changed. And then I'm like, why did the screen change? Did I
Oh my
touch
gosh.
something? Am I interpreting this? Like, it was bizarre.
Have I been interpreting the right podcast this whole time?
There was one part in the end where it looked like I had hit the slow motion button. And I was like, what's happening to you right now? I'm wondering if that's.
Was I like waiting, like
You were
processing?
like,
And
no, you were like all in like slow.
oh my gosh. Wait.
We gotta find it.
Now I'm like, wait, was I in slow motion?
Like one of the second to third last.
I don't even know. At this point, anything is possible. I was laughing because how you went to sign you were like boundary. And I was like, there it is. Now it's like, can we just like split the difference instead of signing boundaries or boundaries? Can we just sign boundaries? Like, oh my gosh. I have a question for you. I have a couple of questions for you, if that's okay. Okay. So my first question for you is, I noticed there were times when you were like expanding where like it wasn't in the source text, it was implied in the source text, but you brought it to the forefront in the target text. And I'm wondering if you did that. I should have written down the example specifically. I remember it had to do with having deaf parents. I'm wondering if you were expanding on that because you were an interpreter or because you also knew the intent, like because you were the source text and that's what you would have said in English had you had the presence of mind to do that. Is my question clear at all?
Yes. I remember one time it happened where I like implicitly was like fat and it wasn't in the source text.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I remember in the very beginning when I started talking about my own diet culture and how I thought it was like all or nothing. I realized I said like fasting, and that was like just muscle. It just happened, and I was like, my brain went, "Oh shit, that's a behavior."
Right. I thought that too, actually, as you were, but I also thought that it wasn't inappropriate because I think you needed the expansion. Because if you're like this, the deaf person's not going to trust the hearing person. They're going to be like, why do they not know what the F do they mean? You know, not that the deaf audience is stupid or something, but just because that's just not how the language works.
Right. So thank you, because I did have disassociation for a second, fell down the rabbit hole. The sentence comes up again, and I was like, well, now I'm expand. Now I'm
and I thought that was fine.
Expand. So
I was getting nervous. You were going to go like this or like this.
I stopped yeah.
And I noticed you stopped yourself and didn't go. I think this is like a trigger word, right? This is not a trigger word. You can fast before having blood work, right?
Right.
So I think that that's like as neutral as a word can be, you know? So I thought that was interesting.
A time later when I was talking about at the doctor's office where I went off script a little bit.
No, it was when you were talking about being a linguistic minority and how I think you might have said, I think the English might have been something along the lines of like, see, I don't know. It's something about like being a linguistic minority or something, or being different. And then I see, I should have written it down. It's fine. It's fine. I think that you were just expanding, like as an interpreter.
Yeah, there were other times where I like edited and expanded on purpose. That was the first time I realized that I was not in control of my interpreting, that I was essentially like sleepwalking. And so I felt myself do that, and my brain went, hey, like the P part of the CRP was like, oh, that's stop. So I
Yeah.
was, so that kind of like put me
Like
back.
you started to regulate yourself more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So then that, I have a question for you. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had another question for you about, I was wondering when it got to the part about Halloween, I feel like something changed in your process. And I'm wondering what was happening there. I noticed it wasn't external processing, but I noticed more like, I don't know about unsurety is not the right word on your face and hands, but it seemed like you were stopping yourself and being more deliberate and slowing yourself down. Like it seemed the speaker was speaking naturally, but your interpretation seemed to have more like,
Hmm.
and I'm wondering, did something happen there?
I have such a clear R with that story. Like even now, it's just
Hmm.
like there. There's like a specific screenshot postcard that I have when I think about it.
Yeah.
I think I was trying not to have my interpreter brain influence my speaker brain
Interesting.
and say things that I hadn't said yet or
Like instead of interpreting off of your R, you wanted to interpret off of the speaker.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
In that moment, and then some other examples where I was talking about the student again. I was trying not to superimpose my live memories, but just try to wait and listen.
I wanted to mention that I thought that I don't want to say you did a good job because that's evaluative with that student, but I thought that you handled that um in a like with finesse in your interpretation. And as I watched you interpret it, I found myself thinking to myself, "Oh, I think that that's an appropriate story to share."
Oh, good. I was worried about that.
Okay, you had a question.
Um, yeah, I wanted to applaud your bravery for talking about your experiences with an eating disorder. And I've been so stressed out for you this past week about like putting it out there. And so I just wanted to just have a moment to say that was so brave. And
Thank you.
how are you? Like, how are you so brave? I would be like,
Oh,
I
see, the thing is,
get like,
that's funny. I don't feel brave. I feel a little bit empowered actually to like name something and it takes its power away, you know?
yeah,
I'm okay with it. And
that's
it's
great.
not like um so it's interesting. I just watched this documentary. I don't know why I did this to myself. It's We Have to Talk About Cosby.
Hmm.
And it's all these women, very, very brave women, like sharing their experiences and the trauma and the absolutely horrible and disgusting things that happened to them. And I'm watching them and I'm like, it's so obvious, not even from what they're saying, but just as they're saying it, that they're just traumatized. This terrible, it's so uncomfortable for them to talk about. It's so hurt, they're still experiencing hurt from it. And when I talk about my experience like that, like I'm blessed in that
Hmm.
I don't feel those things. And I'm not equating, obviously like sexual assault with my
No.
experiences at all. I'm just saying like something that is like hard to talk about is what I'm saying, or generally hard to talk about. I don't have those experiences talking about the things I've gone through, at least with that. And I think it's because I'm just different now, and I'm confident in who I am, so I think that I'm more okay with talking about it now. But thank you so much for mentioning that. That really means a lot to me. Appreciate
We
it.
talk about that with like our students. There's this thing where you live as a marginalized community member, and you've experienced so much trauma that it comes around as like this power.
Right.
And often when you have a privileged interpreter who hasn't experienced any type of trauma like that, they misrepresent that.
Mm,
Right, like we talk about that often, and so I
yeah.
feel like that's what you're saying,
It's
like
interesting. I didn't make that
come
connection. Thank you.
back around. um I I really loved that Naomi was like, right, not only binary men and women, how we use the information. I was like, right. I was
Right.
so focused on like appropriately representing deaf and coda that I forgot.
Yeah.
And I was so thankful for that. And then I also thought it was so interesting that she pulled out the word itself, Kingsland.
Oh yeah, I know. That was really insightful, wasn't it?
It really was.
It's funny. And I think that whole situation is ironic too, that it actually happened. Like, I think it's ironic that that was the word that was being used.
Yeah, I never even thought about it.
I have a note that it was so funny when you were talking about how another interpreter like criticized your pudgy fingers or whatever. Like, you got so hot. You were like, this person. You were like, your affect. I was like, oh. Okay. All right.
I wrote, did we want to do a halfway check-in, or do you still want me to somehow cue you that we're in the halfway point?
No, don't
Number
don't don't
establishment.
interrupt the flow, bro. I kind of looked down and like kind of kept it. I was like, oh, I feel like we started around 8 something, and I kind of like just kept an eye on the time myself. It's fine.
Okay, good. At some point, I had to write down use checks name sign.
Oh, it's fine.
Sorry about that.
I don't even.
I wanted to spell Chelsea, and then checks was
I know. You were like,
this is why it's checks. It's easier to fingerspell. Note to myself was look at the camera, which I never remembered to do. I feel like I'm like
trying to do that tonight a lot.
I'm all over the place. Like, what am I doing? Stay focused, Lori. I personally wrote down, right, you can't not taking notes personally. Every time I was interpreting, where's that accent coming from? Every time I was interpreting and I would see you look down and right, I'm like, oh, I screwed up. What did I screw up?
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Every time you were interpreting it, I mean, a lot of the notes aren't about you, but I was like, oh, thank God, a breather. I could like brain dump right now, you know? It had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with my hands not being busy at that moment, you know?
I know, because I'm not taking notes about you, really.
But every time you took notes, I was like,
I think it's like,
what is she writing?
What did I do wrong? What's going to come up? Right.
Oh my gosh, it's so, we need to explore that further, but not right now.
Yeah. I wrote, we talk so fast. Both of us.
We do talk so fast.
I was exhausted for you. We talk so fast.
Oh my god.
I'm exhausting to manage, but
I'm not gonna lie, I'm really glad I didn't have to interpret you. You talk even faster than I do.
Oh man. Yeah.
I just wrote down, it was like so meta. Like, it was like metaception. Like meta, like cubed, when I'm talking in English about not wanting to use the word fat while interpreting, and I'm interpreting myself talking about not wanting to use the word fat and interpreting, and now filtering myself as I'm interpreting, talking about interpreting, and I'm like, wait, am I accurately representing this
moment?
And I was like, oh my gosh, is there ever a time when I'm gonna get this right? Like, I can't. I was like so not self-conscious because of the word fat, conscious of my process and being like, am I okay? Should I spell fat? Should I sign fat? What's going to be the best way to get this across in the way intended? And this time it wasn't because I was awkward about the word. It could have been the word jelly. But like, because I was talking about how I was interpreting that word, and I'm talking about how I'm interpreting that word, I'm like, do I sign it? Do I spell it? What is happening? It was like,
oh, sure. I at one point noticed too, I said, when I use the example after your moment, and I use the example of like, oh, you gained weight, and we could culturally mediate that. And my brain was like, and I had to stop and write down, like, why did I assume gaining weight was bad? If I said that to Chris, he'd be thrilled.
Ha, that's really funny.
Right? And I was
Sean
like,
too. My husband too.
There's my, right? Like, and I
Holy crow. What? Oh my gosh. So yeah, you look different is actually more appropriate. Oh boy.
Why did I necessarily think that was a bad thing? And Naomi didn't catch it and fix it like she did all my other stuff. So it's just maybe a little bit of our own, like all of our own, like, you know, fat shaming still sort of like.
It's in there, man.
It's in there.
Oh.
I'm trying to think too, like while you're saying, I mean, I get it in English, I don't get it in ASL. I remember when I was in college, I had to write this like 20-page paper, and it was like how certain words are offensive and how maybe growing up with deaf parents and not having those words
Mm.
reflected or resounded differently. And I looked at different culture groups and I had them pick like a word and we talked about it and like how it was offensive and how it was not offensive,
Right.
um, and how that is used and how that's
Mm-hmm.
received and all of that
Right.
as an example. Um, and I remember talking to Naomi, and we talked about her Jewish heritage, and she had made this beautiful statement that stuck with me forever to this day about how her grandparents, who are Holocaust survivors, went to bed one night German, and they woke up the next day German Jews, and how that just changed everything, right?
The hyphen.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
Wow.
So after that, I then went to a friend of mine who was black, and I was like, let's talk about, being called black. Let's talk about being called African American.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not representing all, but this one person in this one moment was saying how they actually prefer black, not because of the, German Jews reason, but just because that's how they identified. But more importantly than terminology was tone.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure.
And I
And I
thought,
feel like you and I have had a lot of conversations about this,
yes, we got
which
our
we don't need to go into the details of the situation,
no,
but I'm
no, no,
thinking
no.
of the same situation
We're
as
thinking
you.
about the same situation.
How you say the word influences the meaning. That's the
Right,
long and the short of it.
right. And so in English, it makes sense to me because I guess maybe I've had those lived tonal experiences. I made
Yeah.
that word up.
No, it's fine.
Whereas in ASL, especially with like body size, I haven't had those experiences.
Hmm.
So I'm like, why are you struggling going fat? Like,
That's fascinating.
you know what I mean? Like, maybe just don't puff your cheeks out so much, but then you're not signing it right, but still we know, you know?
Yeah.
And it's weird because visually,
I wonder if it's because it's also not my native language.
I was just saying,
Like if I was going into English, I understood if I was going from ASL to English and I understood the intent in the ASL, I would not even hesitate. I wouldn't trip up over my intonation
Mhm.
pronouncing the word because it's just like, oh, I know what they mean. I'm going to just say what they mean in the way they mean it. But I think because it's not my native language, that's what I was like, wait, am I doing this right?
Hmm. I like to unpack that way by comparing cultures. If it's wrong in this culture, then it's wrong in all the cultures, right? So this is why I was using tonality and saying the word black in comparison. But I'm wondering, in that framework or in that mindset, would you say fat in English or would you say thick in English? And now is that superimposing like some fat shaming biases that we haven't really uncovered yet?
I think that it would depend on my audience because I would whatever the intent was on the source text, there are some people that would be offended by the word fat. There are some people that wouldn't know what the word, if I said thick to my dad, he'd be like, what does that mean? Like, so I think that audience does influence choice, but I think that also probably plays into register and things like that too. But does that make sense? Like I think it would
Well,
depend on who. It would depend on who.
I'm calling myself out here too because in English, I wouldn't say the fat receptionist. I would say the
I
thick.
might say heavy set.
I would never. The heavy set doesn't come to my brain. I would say chunky.
Oh no, to me, chunky is a little bit.
That's worse, right? I don't know.
Sometimes you know what? And I don't mean this in a way that I'm like filtering. I'm just trying to preserve intent. Uh, Sometimes I would omit. If the person gave enough descriptors, like, oh, the woman who sits at the front with the red curly hair and the glasses, the fat one, I would just say, oh, the woman at the front with the red hair and the red hair and the curly glasses, the red glasses and the whatever I just said.
Right, right.
Like you don't need it because like, okay, we know who you're talking about, right? Like it's just in a list of descriptors at that point. So doing this doesn't harm the message, right?
Mhm. Agreed. But I think
And
that
it's not an omission, it's a preservation of intent.
I now have the word heavy set I can use in my mind. So thank you for that. I
But you
don't.
have to be careful because that also has a negative connotation, it depends.
I go with.
We say big boned. Like sometimes I'll say big boned, and that's different too. Like you can be like I have friends who are big boned. They're thin, but they're big. There's nothing they can do to change their frame. They're never gonna look like Heidi Klum. Heidi, did I say that right? My brain is like not
It could
working.
be one. Mm-hmm.
No, but is that her name?
Heidi Klum, that's a model.
Okay, good. That's what I'm thinking of. Project Runway. Like they're never gonna look like her because their bones aren't her bones, you know? Like, so anyway.
I just think it's funny. Right. Like, because I'll say thick because I've been called thick forever. Or I'll say chunky because people will call me chunky. And I'm
Do you
like,
mean thick with two C's though?
I don't know how to
THICC. That's what I thought you meant.
Why are you giving me spelling quizzes? Do you
Because
know?
it means different. Thick, THICK is different than THICC.
I guess so.
It's like PHAT. No, I'm kidding.
People were calling me that before text messages. So I don't know how.
Never mind. You've only ever heard it spoken. You haven't heard
I've only heard it. Yeah. Okay. So anyway,
Wait, go ahead.
That's my bias, right? Because I'm comfortable with that terminology. I'm projecting it, thinking it's the best way to go, and that's not necessary.
Interesting. But I mean, like, isn't that just like interpreting though? Like at the end of the day, you have to make a decision.
Right.
You have to make a decision. You have to make a judgment call. Sometimes the judgment call lands, sometimes it doesn't. And, you know, there's a lot of factors, and that's why I think intuition is so important for interpreters. That's why Google Translate will never replace an interpreter, because Google Translate does not have a gut.
Right.
I was laughing at you. Sorry, are we done with that? Because I'm gonna go on to something completely random. I was laughing at you because you signed ice cream the New Yorker old fashioned way, whatever the heck it is.
Like that? Well, that's
It's the ice cream. And I was like, there it is. And the last time you signed ice cream, you're like, I didn't sign that. And I was like, play the tape. Play the tape. I'm just laughing.
It was clearly stated in that episode.
Ice cream.
Old New York.
Like ice cream. Okay.
Can we stay on sign choices for a second? Because I have some gripes.
Please go. Go ahead. Lay it on me.
For welcome.
What did you say?
Sign for welcome.
What did I sign?
Welcome. But
I did?
Let's not do that. You did all 5 times. All 5 takes. Let's just do hi.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
feel like that can be this. I feel like welcome to my home, welcome to my podcast. I think that I'm gonna if it makes you upset, I won't sign it, but I stand by my choice.
Well, we talked.
I don't think it's conceptually inaccurate.
We did talk about it.
Did we?
We did, and we both decided on welcome.
Shoot, I don't remember this conversation like at all.
That's the reason why I was like, hey now.
Oh. Well, if I'd remembered that conversation, I wouldn't have, but there's like a space in my brain and it's like empty. I'm pulling that out and I'm like, yep, nope, that one's empty. I don't remember that conversation. Okay. You could be lying to me right now and I'd be like, yeah, I believe you. I don't know. No, I believe you. I'm just kidding, but like I really just don't have any memory of that.
My next sign choice. I'm sorry, this is not IMI, but dyslexia. I don't know if I've ever saw that sign before.
Say it again.
Dyslexia.
Dyslexia?
I don't think I've ever saw that before.
Oh, yeah, I see that a lot.
We'll have to put out a poll. I think you needed to spell that.
Okay. Dyslexia.
I don't know. Old New Yorker. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Dyslexia. Because it's like you flip things. Okay.
Those my notes.
Oh, I have one more for you.
Okay.
When you were like talking about when you were interpreting about how in English we talk about emotion, like we say emotions, but in ASL we show emotions, and then you're saying how Betty is like, how do you know they're mad? Like the spirit of Betty Colonimus came upon you.
Really?
You like became mad. You're like I was like, I saw her face come on your face. It was like a poltergeist. I was like, can we get the exorcist in here? Because you became her. It was so funny. I was like, wow. It was great. I loved it. Oh man, that was funny. That's it. That's all I got.
Oh, I remember I did write down, I had a memory of writing one thing down and then I never said it. I don't know. Fine. I remembered for a moment, but now I forget.
I'm sorry.
No, I remembered it. I forgot, and I wrote it down. And I don't know.
Can you tell how humid it is in my basement? Do you see my hair? This is because I'm. It's humid. This is what's happening.
How? So just overall, how do you feel about how it went?
The podcast or the interpreting?
Interpreting. Both.
I really enjoyed it actually. I thought it was going to be weird. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was super weird.
Yeah.
But I think that just not having to work to have an R because I already had it,
Mhm.
just I was able to not have to work so hard, not to exert so much mental energy. Like I don't feel so exhausted right now. Whereas in the past, I would leave these being like, all right, I'm gonna go take a bath now, you know? But I don't feel that so much right now. How do you feel?
No, you're right. I feel like I never feel like I have time or the energy to interpret these, but then I'm like, am I just like that person as an interpreter? Do I never like show up fully ready? We
Hmm.
talk about that all the time, like being divas and like the temperature has to be just right and
Oh my gosh, the temperature is so not right now. I'm just telling you.
really hot too. But you know, and I'm like, I don't know. Was I ready to do this? Did we have to do this right now? We're just like wanted to get out the accessible version.
I do
So
feel like we always feel like that though.
yeah, but like right, but like why am I always like I'm not ready for this? Like what do I
Hmm.
need to be ready for this? I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel a little like I guess I'm always hard on myself for being like I don't want to be like a prima donna about my
I
work.
just think that like correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like in our lives are really busy right now. I was saying to my husband yesterday, I don't know, I can feel like when cortisol is like building up in my body because I'm just like stressed. And sorry, this is going to be like a very hearing centric reference, but I said to Sean, I was like, you know when you're playing Mario in like the 90s and you're on the level and like the level you're running out of time and the music starts going faster. Yeah, and the music starts going faster and faster and faster and you're like, ah! Like I feel like the music has been going faster in my life lately
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. And like even coming into this, not because I didn't want to do this, but just because in my life, I feel like I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. And I think that that's like a life problem. I don't think that that's like a me not being ready as an interpreter problem. That's what I'm experiencing right now. That's the stage I'm in. I don't know about you. I feel like we're busy moms. We're women who have a business. We're interpreters. We have families. We have to take care of our houses, like all this stuff. We're teachers, you know? I don't know.
But then I feel like I made a commitment to make these accessible and we want to get through these and we want to get through some other ones like Dave Ramsey and um, Adam Grant stuff. And I feel like we are like, yeah, we want to do this and we have the right intentions. And um, so then why can't I show up for it? You know what I mean? Like,
But are
do you
you not showing up though? Like, how could you show up more?
we, I don't know.
This
I
is
mean,
like a therapy session. I'm
I
sorry.
know it is. I'm sorry. But then I always blame, like, why didn't I prep? But how could I have prepped any better for me? So it wasn't about
I mean,
preparation.
I guess you could have listened to the whole podcast all the way through, but
Because,
is that really like that's not how interpreting works, you know?
no, I think for me, it's like emotionally attending. You know, like I'm trying,
Hmm.
like I was disengaged. I felt myself come out and come back in. Um, that,
Also, let's just give ourselves some grace and remember that mental capacity is maxed out after 45 minutes, though. This podcast was an hour and 15 minutes. We did all the way without a break. I would venture to say I have written down like when I said I was like, yeah, I just lost time. Like I have no idea what was just said. Like literally played the tape and it was like in Arrested Development, no footage found. Like um and I would venture to say that was probably around the 45-minute mark for me, you know?
yeah, you're right. Okay. I wish we got to talk about the panel of deaf body positive influencers, but it
Well,
wasn't.
we didn't have it set in stone yet.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
We'll advertise enough for that, don't worry.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to all audiences, which is why I wish it was a little bit more ready when this podcast was being shared, but that's okay. Um, yeah, I feel bad. Like we had this great opportunity, and I had COVID, and it was eating my brain. But I'm so glad. When I listened to it, and I was like, "This was mild. It was mild. It was mild. Mild. Like you couldn't edit out 3 of those milds.
Stop.
Come on, girl."
You're
So
funny.
yeah, but overall, I feel satisfied with what we did, and
Yeah, that's great. Alrighty, friend.
all right, that's
I think
it.
that's it for me.
Me too. Good night.